Good morning, everybody, and happy Star Trek Day, or Thursdays. Any normal human probably calls it Thursday. For those of you who are not familiar, today is the premiere of Lower Decks. I haven't seen it yet, but I will. So, I actually was going to watch it before the show, but getting my child up seemed to have been more difficult than it needed to be. So I got kind of going on that one. So I'm still having problems with Photoshop. I have it running here, but I have noticed, and this has happened more than once, Photoshop just suddenly will crash once the Creative Cloud server can no longer authenticate again. I put in my username and password to run Photoshop this morning, but that only seems to last for a certain amount of time, and I don't know what that certain amount of time is, before it just says, do you want to save everything before we close Photoshop? And you say, yes, and then it saves it, and that's the name of that. So what we're going to do today is we're going to work on some world building here. That's what we're going to do. We're going to do some world building with Bellatrix Rising. I've been doing a lot of other people's work all week, and I think we've got a day here. I spent some good time last night working on script writing and stuff like that, and I got some very good world building concepts that are going on. So I wanted to kind of discuss this. Many of you probably know the history of Bellatrix Rising. Good morning. Ooh, that's pretty brutal. I hope your cousin's okay. Donald, it's good to see you, though. I hope you can join me for this discussion. This is definitely a Donald discussion. We're going to talk about an aspect of world building that I came up with last night. For those of you who are familiar with what the story of Bellatrix Rising, I had a comic called Tamerlane, which was a Star Trek comic. I can't use the Star Trek name and stuff like that, so I'm doing an Orville. I'm taking everything from Star Trek, my Star Trek story, keeping the characters and the concept, and moving it over to my own IP. Well, a couple of the stories rely heavily on critical Star Trek concepts, like Prime Directive. You can't, how do you deal with a Prime Directive if you can't say, quote, the Prime Directive? So I came up with an in-universe solution for this, and that is the Constitution of Worlds. And that is once the humans left Earth in my story, they ended up at this star, at this planet, where they came up with a new galactic constitution, so to speak, which works for everybody. So I wanted to discuss it with you guys, see if it sounds reasonable, sounds good, what do you think about it, stuff like that. So we're going to work on today world building, the Constitution of Worlds. And maybe what I'll have Donald here for the first part of this, and then when he has to leave, I'll pick up Brent for the last part of this, and we'll see whether that helps or not. But I need to find the document. There it is. And then load the document, apparently, which will take some time. Hey, Brent's here too! Oh, good. Okay, Brent, I don't know if you heard what I was saying, but we're going to talk about this Constitution of Worlds. So, I'm going to go ahead and switch to boring mode, but that's all right. At least we can talk about it here. Okay, so Constitution of Worlds. This was a constitution that was written, obviously, the founders of Touchdown in the world of Silver Cove, when they made it to, you're sort of here, when they made it to, I'm hoping you can get your brain rolling here, because we got stuff here to work on. So this is my kludge, right. This is my kludge to solve the the fact that I no longer have the prime directive, and I no longer have like eugenics war and things like that didn't happen in my world. So we've got other things that are in here. Okay, so here are the 5 core rules that I'm building here, the Constitution, that the cultures in the story all follow. So, kind of going on here, I can explain why I kind of put these 5 in here. The first one, rule 1, is no being shall be denied the right to life. That makes some sense. Part of the reason that that's there, of course, is to stop wars, right? Because the idea was if you have to, by rules are made to be broken. Thanks, Raph. It's good to have you around. So, and they are. I mean, Raph's absolutely spot on. Having these rules in the world means that they're going to be broken. Rule number 3 has been broken like 5 or 6 times since then. I've missed you too, man. I missed you a lot. But you and I both walked off of Facebook, and that didn't help either one of us keep in touch with one another. Hey, troll. While you're trolling, do you want to troll tomorrow morning and join me? Or are you working tomorrow? Speaking of trolling, if you're working tomorrow, that's cool. But if you're not working tomorrow, you want to join the show tomorrow morning? Because it's Friday, and we could all check in and talk to each other. Yeah, I walked off Facebook too. I didn't delete my account like you did, but I just walked away for a little while. It was getting too intense. Cool. Then I'll give you a message tomorrow morning and we can have you on the show, and that'd be awesome. So that's cool. This time 10 to noon. We don't have to go the entire time if you don't want to. So, but Fridays are usually when I have a guest. So that'd be cool. It'd be awesome to have you there, man. I missed you. So, okay, to the point here, we've got our Constitution here, and hey, I think that means that Raph will be with me tomorrow. Yay. Okay, so these are the 5 rules that they've got here. Rule number 1 is about war mostly. No being can be killed by the civilization unless it poses a direct threat. That way, you can see the arguments in the Congress as they start saying, but they're a direct threat. Number 2 says, I like number 2 just because I added it in because I'm kind of funky. No being will deny the right to have every chance to better themselves, but number 2 becomes part of like both the cultures that are in our story have a different idea of how imprisonment works because of Rule 2. Rule 3 is specifically limiting genetic manipulation and artificial intelligence. So there's actually what they call the Jenkins line, which is the line of which you can modify a human before you're not allowed to go anymore. And then there's, I think I call it like Rule 1 or I don't know, whatever, or some kind of, anyway, there's something for artificial intelligence. But this explains why there's no androids in my story. Rule 4 is that's the one that will be acting as the prime directive. So you can't act upon a race of people unless they fully understand the consequences of your action. So I thought I had an interesting discussion, strangely enough, with my son, who seems to grasp these very well, but he's also sort of a rules lawyer in his own right. And so he was talking to me about this, and he's like, so I can't be arrested? And I'm like, no, you can be arrested. You just have to fully understand what the consequences of the arrest will be. You have to understand you're going to go to jail for 60 days, and you will have to go to trial. And, that's going to be like the thing in this culture is they have to tell you and you have to say you fully understand this. Yeah, so that's kind of cool. And then Rule 5 is also sort of part of the prime directive here. You know, you can't screw with somebody. You know, they have a right to live their life as they want to live their life, the way they want to live their life, unless it poses a direct threat. Which part don't you understand? That's why I'm doing it. So you can't be a droid in our world. Sorry, Bran. But I always had a problem with Star Wars. The droids are clearly sentient, but boy, they treat them like second-class citizens, which is something that they sort of broached in Rogue One, and that's one of the reasons why I loved Rogue One. But then they didn't follow through. The wimps. If I ever write a Star Wars story, it's all going to be about a droid revolution. I swear. You can't be arrested. See, Raph, you and my son think the same way. I just totally called you a 10-year-old. Yeah, like on-off switches. That's not cool. In Star Trek, we explored Data's on-off switch, which I found. Well, yeah, you are kind of mentally 10. That's about right. No, I can arrest you in my world, Raph. I just have to make sure you understand clearly what's going to happen by being arrested. It really would be sort of the effect of the Miranda rights, you know. You have the right to remain silent. You have the right to an attorney and to have one present. You know, that kind of thing. It'd have to be... right? I think Han Solo did start a droid revolution in his own right. But, so anyway, yeah, I think, so that's kind of what I wanted to discuss. I got all you guys on here. We're all kind of a brain trust right now. Let's look over this. Can I use this? First of all, does it sound reasonable? Does it sound like something that people could theoretically come up with? Second of all, do we think that this would work well to patch the Prime Directive? Because a couple of my Tamerlane stories hinge on Prime Directive. So it's important that I have a rule set here that fits the Prime Directive. So wanted to kind of also look at this. There probably are also sub-rules, I would think, because I felt like 4 covers like a lot of broad strokes, but doesn't in fact cover things like arresting people. You know, do you have a right to trial in this culture? Do you have a right to a speedy trial? Do you have a right to all of that? I didn't feel like that was necessary in the Constitution. And I feel like it'd be interesting to see, like, let's say both cultures. There are 2 sentient cultures and a whole bunch of little teeny cultures that are in the story. And the 2 really big cultures would have a different interpretation of 4. You know. So, like, your 4th right. Okay, well, you know, Raph is a citizen of the Unity, and since he's a citizen of the Unity, we interpret his 4th right as saying that, you know, he has to have everything explained. Right? That's exactly what I was thinking too. That Raph says that he thinks it'll work in your world, especially because it leaves it open for governmental abuse and the hiding of facts, which you guys know me well. That's definitely going to be an aspect of the story somewhere. There's going to be shuffling and mixing of things, and I love making that aspect of reality where you have the characters have to struggle against a little bit of that. Yeah, much like the U.S. Constitution, which has the same problems. I also like the fact that some of it is kind of dated, like the U.S. Constitution. The Constitution of the United States is somewhat dated. Our Third Amendment to the Constitution, nobody even talks about. Mostly because it's not a real problem for us. And so it sort of walked out of its usefulness. Oh, Raph. I'm not going to get into too much of a political discussion. I think you and I are pretty much on the same page, though. To be fair, I'm pretty sure you and I are on the same page. But we don't need to get into that here, because of course I'm going to talk about the current world. Yeah, let's not get into that. But know that we're thinking the same thing. So, terminology would be fifth right, first right, things like that. So that you've heard the terminology, and I put that in there. I also put into this document some of the things that have occurred. It requires an act of Congress to start a war because of one, first right. I'm going to call that first right. Second right is why there are no prisons in the Confederacy. The Confederacy is the bad guys in this story. There are prisons in Unity. Yeah, you know what? I thought that too. Like, you have a right to a third-party a third-party dispute arbiter. But then I thought that felt more like, so going from the top here on this one, this is, the founders of Touchdown. This is the new time, they're starting this new time system, galactic time, to be unified with all the other cultures that they've run into, because they ran into a bunch of alien cultures during the Great Galactic War. And they went from, we live on this planet all by ourselves, to, oh crap, we're one of like 12 sentient races. And so, it's like, well, gee willikers, So the idea here seems to be, these are the 5 undeniable rights that you can't, we can't break as individuals to one another. But I thought about a right to arbitration, but that seems like government, not a right. You know what I mean? Like, like they would have to devise a system for that. And it's somewhat covered under the second right, because you have a second right to better yourselves. So that's the right to every being in the civilization is a right to be better than, to make yourself better. And so that has to be protected. And so you can't be imprisoned and locked away. So we have to figure out a way to reasonably make you be able to be better, to better yourself. So that's the key. I actually intentionally put that in there, and I'm glad you caught that, Brent. Because, as Raph has, the founding fathers, Raph asked who are the founding fathers of the Federation in Star Trek. The founding fathers are the founding 5 races in Star Trek. So it's the humans, the Vulcans, the Tellarites, the Andorians, and the Alpha Centaurans. So those are the founding 5 races of the Federation. So Brent has asked, how do you define intelligence? I intentionally put that in there because I foresee them abusing the hell out of that. Well, cows aren't an intelligent race, so we can kill them. I figured, in my mind's eye, these guys are all sitting around on this planet, which is probably somewhat hostile, because I don't think they landed on the first Earth-like planet when they left. So I would be willing to bet that Silver Cove is not a very nice planet. It's probably pretty rough. So they've got like a handful of cows and some chickens and stuff like that to make basic farm. And I'll bet you that they argued over, well, now wait a minute. If all beings are, you can't act upon all beings, then we can't kill the cows for food, and we can't kill the chickens for food. And what do you do there? So they put intelligent beings in there, which is key because a couple of the Bellatrix stories ask that question. And so I intentionally put that in so that the characters can ask that question in the stories. Because that is an important question. How do you define intelligence? I mean, how do you define what is an intelligent being? So yeah, that was, I'm glad you caught that, Brent. I absolutely put that in there intentionally so that they can manipulate it and twist it. And you can see Congress is saying, well, we can go to war with these people because they're not intelligent. Wait a minute. Now that's a little off the path. But to be fair, that is exactly how history has played out with us over and over and over. We did that with the Native Americans. We did that with the Japanese. We did that with, we did that with the African Americans. I mean, it's constantly a push to, they're not intelligent, therefore we can. And so, hey, Raph says an intelligent being is one that farts and then blames it on somebody else. Okay, Raph, I think you've been hanging around your kid too long. Because he's like, fart jokes are funny. Oh, boy. It wouldn't be so bad, except that... Oh, you got kicked out from phone call. They found another ride. Hey, good. That's good. You can hang out here. You're like, no, this is a good conversation. We're going to have this conversation. When I was writing Tamerlan stories, they all were asking key questions. Every episode of Tamerlan was asking a specific question. I like moral quandaries. I like to make people think about stuff. So, right? Brent's totally intelligent. He blames his daughter. You got it. I love the commentary that we're all blaming our kids. Huh. That's the way it goes in the real world, I guess, is just pawn it off on their child. So, yeah, I mean, I'm really fascinated by how much of this story can I lock down to make logical sense, so that the characters have something to fight against, but also gives us a reasonable analogy to modern problems and difficulties and issues, so that I can make a commentary on that too. I am a firm believer that a lot of the problems in life come from just simple misunderstandings. We just don't get it. We miss something. We miss a data piece. Something like that. It's part of the reason why I had to walk away from Facebook, because I kept doing that and people kept blaming me for being a moderate or walking the line. And I kept saying, I'm not walking the line. I see miscommunications and data problems, where somebody is walked off of the issue by doing something else. And I can't seem to be able to tell people that. I can't seem to be able to communicate with people about that. So instead, I'm going to write stories. So there. I mean, that's the way Gene Roddenberry did it. So clearly it's the way Seth MacFarlane's going, because he's saying the same thing. So these are all things that I'm working on. So the Constitution of Worlds. I even put it in stone. Look at me putting it in stone. Like, literally there is... People are stupid. I don't know, Raph. I'm not going to follow you on that one. I'm just not. Because I just don't think it's true. So anyway, here's what I was going to do, is I was actually going to have they literally put it into a stone on this planet. And yeah, Brent's like, I see both sides of the coin. That's why I don't argue over things. And I'm like, I see both sides of the coin, and then I argue over things. And it's so sad. And all I've ignorant. I don't know if I would say ignorant. That doesn't seem like that's. I mean, it's entirely plausible, but yeah. And Donald's saying there will always be other empires that won't abide by the unity rules. Groups with superior tech, intellectual backgrounds that think nobody can dictate those rules. Look at the Ferengi, they break rules all the time, and they're a smaller empire. I completely agree. I think this was designed to say that those who agree to this Constitution have to enact it upon other people. So, it's a four-sided coin with time and space. So, like, for example, I mean, because really, this literally is my prime directive. Or at least I'm trying to make it into a prime directive. But I'm also giving a few more little bits and pieces that the characters have to abide by. Why haven't we made androids? Well, because that's a violation of the Constitution. Why haven't we genetically modified everybody to be absolutely flawless? That's a violation of the Constitution. Things like that. So it gives sort of some texture that allows the characters to really work with this. I thought also about making it so that the punishment of violating the Constitution was, death or something horrible like that. Then I realized it might be better to just say, look, the reason we keep the Constitution is because it makes us better people. And everybody sort of follows it because of that. And, if you are violating the Constitution, then clearly you are a direct threat to yourself or the livelihood of that. Uh-oh. See you later, Raph. Man, you were trolling too. But it was good to have you. So, I'll see you tomorrow. It'll be good to have you on the show. So, anyway, moving right along, I completely agree with you, Donald. I think that there will be people who, I think there will be people who will definitely try to break the rules of the Constitution. Certainly, there will always be those kind of people. And I think really all this is to say, I feel like I look in my mind to being what the people who were the founders at Touchdown, right? And what were they thinking and what were they going through? And I think more along the lines of they're coming out of a war of which, there will definitely be separate punishments for military and civilians. But they're coming out of a war during which supernatural things happened. I mean, it was damaging to the universe. It was damaging. There were life forms being involved that don't live in our universe and things like that. So they're coming out of a war which they didn't come out on top necessarily. They won the war, but they lost a lot of battles. Sort of thing. So I kind of get the impression that this is okay, here we are, this is the last bits of humanity, and we're all struggling to survive. And I'm thinking, 25,000 people perhaps, maybe 30,000 people made it through the end of this. So not a lot of us made it through the war. And so you're coming out of this war. Suddenly you're surrounded by aliens, all these other creatures that helped you win the war. You can be a closet droid. Yes. With synth skin. You totally can. In fact, I am sure that there are droids that wander through this universe that are in violation of the Third Reich. But what do you do? Once it's sentient, destroying it would be a violation of the first right. This is part of why I love this setup. Now I have that question to ask, right? If you run into a droid, what do you do with it? Right? It's sentient. What happens when you run into a sentient droid? It's a violation of the third right. But to kill it would be a violation of the first right, right? Yeah, that's what I'm thinking too, is that we have, okay, so I'll push it to 50,000. But 50,000 people made it. And it's not just 50,000, like the Chinese that Li is part of, Li Cheng, the captain, that group left with about 10,000 people before the devastation of Earth. They started their own colony in the middle of the war. So they left. There's a group of about 10,000 people called Blue Dots, who were Earth-centric people and only wanted to keep Earthers with Earthers. They left as well prior to the end of the war. So there's another 20,000 people or so that left prior to that. So the 50,000 refugees from Earth are a clump that left after about 20,000 left before that. Over the ensuing then remaining 500 years to now, those people have intermingled. The societies collapsed. The remainder of those cultures then merged back in with the big population. But it does mean you end up with weird ethnic diversity and then pure blood Chinese who run through this line, which is kind of weird because, of course, they didn't come back in and fold back in until later on, last 150 years or so. In fact, yes. We also know that in Star Trek they had sentient machines that fought each other, not counting Westworld episodes. Says Donald. So I'm writing some of this stuff down. 50K refugees. I'm going to say it was like 100K to begin. But a lot of them didn't make it through the first couple of winters at Silver Core or Silver Cove. Because that's realistic as well. Our refugees get there. They're short on supplies. They're short on and that also tempers this Constitution, right? You've got a bunch of people who they didn't make it. They lost family members and things like that through the first couple of winters or whatevers, or monsters that come up from the ground and eat people, or I don't know, giant bats. I have no earthly idea. But whatever's the story, by the time they establish a culture, there's only 50K left. So by the time we become sustaining and self-sustaining, and diseases stop wiping people out, and creatures stop wiping people out, and stuff like that, then they build this Constitution of Worlds. So this Constitution should reflect a culture that survived a supernatural intervention in a war, and that's also part of the story. So there's part of this. And to survive that, then they survived intervention, or then they survived many years of hardship before they stabilized. Then they decide, alien viruses. It would be amazing to think of what little bugs could just do to us. I mean, if you think that Salmonella and Giardia get to us, it's like those things can kill us, and they're common here. So who knows what was on this planet? So after these first group of people made it, then they built this Constitution of Worlds. They probably also had assistance from the other life forms. There are a couple of life forms in my world that can live in what we would call Class M worlds. Also, oxygen is rare. An oxygen environment is rare. So in the world, because it requires that you had some kind of converter on your planet, something that converted what is normal. Remember, you're to be the ATC guy. Yes. See, now you've added such a lot of depth to this character. Suddenly, Brent's saying he's the air traffic controller but he's secretly a droid, and he worries that he'll always be found out. But people just currently believe he's like a cyborg or something. And yes, there are cyborgs. So I love that concept. I think that's actually really fun. Entirely plausible that you'll end up with a story because of that. And that's pretty deep, right? That's asking a lot of the Constitution there. And it ends up with that moral dilemma, right? So Brent, it's totally cool, dude. You join us when you can. That's I figured I'd sit here and chat and see how long it took before Photoshop crashed on me. So, right? It's a good storyline. It's interesting. I can't promise that I'll get there because I've already kind of decked out a lot of this story. But certainly he's there and it's interesting. So, Donald says some worlds might have wanted to have rules in place before joining. And that's probably true too. Proof that you're not going to treat us like crap. Proof that you're going to treat everybody equally. Proof that, we see the storybooks from the Earth that was, and, up until the last 100 years, you guys are kind of shaky. It's like, so tell me you're not going to dominate and control and things like that. So anyway, so I did set this up to be sort of, it's definitely set up as a firm, literally set in stone thing. So they put this Constitution on a stone and then stuck it where you can see it and stuff like that. So I'm fascinated by this idea. So anyway, what do we all think about these 5 core rules? Do we think that they are viable enough, that they sound reasonable and sound good for the purpose of the story to be used? They sound like they're kind of an interesting idea. Any thoughts? I agree with Donald that one of the thoughts I had was some kind of arbitration. You have a right to arbitration of some sort. Right. So Donald's saying, a sentient 4-inch droid inside a biological body with a secret that they don't tell anybody, like Big Dude in MIB. But instead a little droid in the head. He's having a lot of fun with this. Which, that's the thing, right? If you build a good world, then stories are just a given. They just sort of pop up, you just suddenly think of all these things, you're like, oh, okay, well, what about that? And what about that? And that's actually what happened last night. I was sitting there and I was working with one of the old Tamerlan scripts and I was trying to repurpose it. And one of the plot twists in it is that, hey, prime directive. Well, okay, but I can't just say prime directive. So I was like, let's think of this. Okay, how can I make prime directive into something I can use? And that's where Constitution of Worlds came out. And as soon as I did, right, iRobot, it's funny. Isaac Asimov, as much as I love Asimov, he never really was big on characters. He felt that story was more important than characters. And so, or the sci-fi aspect didn't mean he didn't put characters in. He just felt like his priority was to convey a concept and a story, which I feel a lot of the greats here. That's probably easier. I can do this. I just had it on a picture, and I was pretty proud of the picture. So, I'm an artist. These are the things that artists think about. Okay, let's bring that up a little more. There we go. So yeah, and I'm actually trying to settle this in so that it's not so rough, because I'm going to start twisting the plot lines a little to fit. Every time the prime directive is brought up, I'm going to start saying it's fourth or fifth right, right? Or fourth right. And that's very forthright. Anyway, so when we start dealing with prime directive issues and things like that, I can now start referring to this document, which makes more sense. And the instead of them saying, I think that's a violation of the prime directive, which, to be fair, a lot of the rules in Star Trek were written to serve a story, as opposed to having the story serve the rules. So their prime directive gets broken not because the characters like Kirk are evil or whatever, but because the prime directive was put into effect to serve the story. We've got to lock down a way so that the Telosians aren't messed with. We'll call it General Order 1. Okay. So that's fine, but then you end up with, okay, so is it a violation of the prime directive if the planet is being destroyed? Which, to be fair, TNG did explore that. I mean, TNG walked into that a couple of times with, we have to save these people, but we can't tell them that we exist because of that. And in this case, I've got an end run around that now. Now you can save those people because the civilization, their world being destroyed is the exception to the fifth right? It says, unless they pose a direct threat to themselves, or there's a direct threat to them. So you can't bother them. You can't mess with a culture that you've run into unless it's being threatened, at which time you can intervene. However, by Rule 4, you have to make sure that you act upon them and tell them what's going on. So you have to send down a team of people to explain, hi, we're aliens. We're very sorry that your world's about to blow up, but your world's about to blow up. We're going to take you onto these ships. You understand that you will not have a culture anymore here because it will be destroyed. We can put you on another planet, yada, yada, yada. So it gives an interesting twist to that, in that Unity ships can rescue people off of a planet that's about to be destroyed, where Federation ships have to let them die. So I thought that was a good counterbalance, and I also think that it's cool that there's more than one. They're not just dealing with a prime directive now, they're dealing with nuances of different amendments to their constitution. So, though individuals will always be sort of flaky, there will be, I'm sure, military has to adhere thoroughly to the Constitution. Because, of course, just like our military officers will have sworn an oath to protect this Constitution. So they will have to. abide by it. So, okay, cool. Well, that was sort of where I was going today. Right. Actually, I call it the Constitution of Worlds because I thought about core beliefs, but I think some other science fiction thing has core beliefs, and I didn't want to get into that. And I figure the Constitution of Worlds, that seems to cover a lot of it, you know. So, Constitution of Worlds is sort of what I was thinking. The Rules of the Stone is good. That's a good one too. Unity Code. So, I'm absolutely sure. Donald's saying that the military will also have another set of rules they've added to it. There will be some version of the UMCJ. I mean, so Brent, to answer your question, he's like, is there a federation or like? So it's 500 years since this Constitution was written. It's been 500 years. So since this Constitution is written, the world has changed, or the galaxy has changed a little bit. There are now two distinct major powers at play here, and a bunch of little teeny things all over the place. Sometimes you just have 25 people on a planet, right? And it's like, that's just, they live there. And they live in domes or something because the planet's nasty. But there are two major cultures. The Unity is our heroes, so to speak. The Confederation is the other side. Really what I did was I went to the thesaurus and typed in Federation and looked at all of the possible alternatives for Federation. And sadly, all of our major sci-fis have kind of walked away with everything. I can't say Union because that's Orville. I can't say Federation, obviously. And it's not that I was really that worried. What I was mostly trying to do was, double jeopardy. There, like I said, there will be some sub-government rules, like right to a speedy trial, double jeopardy, things like that. I didn't feel like that was a constitutional right so much as a government right. You know, the government can't do X, Y, or Z. Yeah, so Confederation is the other side. The Confederation, or the Confederacy, however you want to call it, the Confederation is the bad guys in our story. The Klingons of the story. Except that, like Confederation of Planets. They live in a structure called the Hyades cluster, which is closer to Earth than Bellatrix. And it's actually in a place called the Bernard Loop, and it's a ring of gas that for a long time we thought was part of the Orion Nebula, but it isn't. It's actually much, much, much closer. So they live in the stars that are in that birthing nebula. They're very young stars in there. And so the planets are rougher, hard to live on. Bellatrix is easier to live on. It's also young, but the planet that the main characters live on is actually a moon of a gas giant, which actually had liquid water. So they terraformed it, and now it's breathable. So Renum is the world that they live on. But yeah, so you have the Unity in near Bellatrix in the Bellatrix cluster, and then you have the Hyades cluster, which has the Confederation in it, and they are ideologically almost at war. And it's because the Confederacy is exploiting the magic aspect of this. An echo of the war is that there is the ability to use a super tech that came from the war that is effectively magic. It does all the it's the Force. So if you imagine, it's not really the Force, but it's like the Force, right? And the people of Unity have a belief that that's bad, and the people of the Confederacy believe that it's okay and acceptable. There's more to it. It's got a lot of depth to that, but it has a lot to do with what happened at the end of the war. So they're ideologically apart on this one, and so the overriding plot here is that they're at the brink of a war, but neither one of them can find justification just yet to violate first right, which is what they're working on in the story. Not our characters. Our characters just happen to be innocent bystanders of this overriding arc. So they're living their lives. This is the Cold War that Star Trek was in. Tamerlane took place in the original series. So I had the overtones of the Klingon Federation Cold War affecting Tamerlane, but not affecting Tamerlane. You know what I mean? Like, they had echoes of it, just like Kirk kept running into Klingons over and over and over. We had sort of the same thing. So I had to make a simulacrum that fit in Bellatrix so that my characters can also have this pressure of a Cold War that's pushing down on them during, to give reasoning for not having a full exploratory space program. They instead have this, when we get a Cold War hanging over our heads, so we have to be more militant. There's a reason why we have guns on everything, and stuff like that. And it gives reason for skirmishes and sparks between the two, and yada yada yada. It also has some character development pieces that are involved in it, and I'm not going to spoil that because that actually is part of the story. So, by the way, all of this is not based on the story. This is all just the background being painted in. So none of this involves the story directly. It's all just part of the universe that you sort of see these guys are living in. We're 500 years now from the Constitution of Worlds. Everybody still follows the Constitution of Worlds, but these two different cultures now have absolutely different interpretations of this Constitution. The Unity is a republic. The Confederacy is a direct democracy because it's younger. So there's a lot of fascinating things to explore about that. But because it's a direct democracy, if any of you are familiar with the Orville episode, Majority Rules, and there's also a Dark Mirror episode that's similar to that, the Confederacy runs into that problem a lot. Voting by popularity and things like that. They have to suffer with that. I mean, it's not like the Unity, which is a representational democracy. They run into problems too. Both of them do. But it is kind of cool. Yes. And it also gives fertile ground, right? Before, Cochrane had to deal with X, Y, or Z, and gee willikers, we always have these horrible commodores who are in charge of this sector or some aspect of that. And now I actually have the ability to give twist to Cochrane's simulacrum, which is Chang. Chang now has all of this newer and more fertile ground to work with. Now I can literally block my character from going into X, Y, or Z because, well, that's a war zone now. Or she's coming back from a skirmish, or she's coming back from an issue. Um, they're fighting. The Unity is fighting border groups that live on the outside of the Confederacy, who are trying to start a fight between the Confederacy and the Unity, effectively the Maquis, who are trying to promote a fight. And the Unity isn't buying into it yet, but they might as the story progresses. So instead, the Unity has these border skirmishes with these guerrilla warrior sort of people. So all of our characters now have a gravitas to them because they've been in fights. They've been in wars. We start the story out with the Kittiwake actually in service and down for 2 weeks because she got beat up pretty good in a skirmish. And so that's important because I kind of wanted to show what life was like for our crew in the first story. So the first episode has the Kittiwake down, and they're just stuck in the city on the big ship. So they're stuck wandering around the city and doing things in the city, and we get sort of an idea of what it's like, what life is like in this culture. So that's sort of where we're going with a lot of this, and this is where all this background construction is happening. Right. And Donald's saying, not counting that there are probably hundreds of empires that we haven't found yet across the galaxy. And that's absolutely true. That's part of what's fun about this, right? Is the finding the other life forms, and then here are the people that are effectively Romans, and here are the people that are where is the simulacrum for the Romulans? I don't even have those guys, so they're out there somewhere. There are Romulans out there. We just haven't met them yet. So there's all kinds of stuff going on here that's cool. The Synth Empire. Brent's really into this. There's an empire of synths out there somewhere. And actually, I'm not disagreeing with this. I think that's totally reasonable. Having a synth empire sounds like a great thing. So I appreciate you guys kind of... Right? They call themselves the 0101 Empire. It's like the Binars. Whom we saw the Binars for one episode, and we never see them again. I'm like, but I liked those guys. Oh, hey, Luna. Welcome here. We're talking about world building. We're discussing world building. I'm clearly not able to switch. Oh, I'll bet you guys aren't hearing music at all because I didn't do the little switchy thingy before my show today. Why is it not switching? There we go. No. Well, fine. And Patsy's here too. Oh, good. You guys can chime in on this. So, Patsy Luna, for those of you, right, how else would your character come about? Says Brent, if he's talking about the Synth Empire. He has to talk about the Synth Empire. I actually kind of like this theory. Oh, that's kind of cool, too. Luna's saying she's imagining a synth empire made of synth waves. So they're just being made of sound, right? They're just like, whoa, 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 whoa. That's kind of cool. Or maybe they just, an empire full of 80s hair bands, Anyway, so Patsy Luna, we're talking about a document that I wrote up last night as part of my story for Bellatrix Rising. I needed to kind of bring you up to speed here. Bellatrix Rising, I've taken all of my stories from Tamerlane, which is a Star Trek fan comic, and I was making such really... No, I like the storyline too, Brent. Keep going with it, man. I'm not I don't mean to diss you. You're doing great. Anyway, I had this idea of moving all of these over so that I didn't have to use Star Trek's IP. Yeah, we're going to go with the 80s hairband. Or maybe they're androids that all decided to be 80s hairband people. It works. Anyway, and now I'm totally seeing Angie making some snark comment about this. Ewok Sith Lord. Everyone laughs until it gets mad. It's true. I actually I have a website that I go to, which I love to death, and it just randomly generates names, right? And I use it anytime I need a name. Anytime I need kind of a character name. Well, the default page for it, because it's called Fantasy Name Generator, the default page for it is fairy names, like as in with wings and fairies. And I loaded the page and I was about to switch over, and down there at the bottom was Cookie Sugar Shine as a fairy name. And I started laughing because I thought the next time I play a game which has fairies or something like that in it, I'm totally going to play this character named Cookie Sugar Shine, that you have to spring her from prison because she killed somebody for laughing at her name, right? And she is so sick of being made fun of for being Cookie that she's become this uber assassin sort of person now, because she's... And I thought that would be such a fun character to play. So, anyway, Cookie Sugar Shine. There you go. Cookie Sugar Shine. You only laugh until she kills you. Sort of thing. So, anyway, that has nothing to do with our story here. It just has everything to do with the next time I'm playing a D&D character or something in that fantasy realm. I'm going to see if I can't find a way to make Cookie Sugar Shine. Woo, doggy. That's going to be a fun character. Okay, Luna and Patsy, welcome to the show. We're talking about backstory and world building for Bellatrix Rising. Biggest problem I'm running into is a couple of the stories that I have, all of the stories that I have from Tamerlane have some moral dilemma that is often based in some way around concepts that were brought up in Star Trek. Right? Sounds like an MLP character. Luna's saying it sounds like an MLP character. I kind of agree. And the problem that I've got, of course, is now I have moved over to my own universe, and I can't just up and say, that's a violation of the Prime Directive, because that's a Star Trek reference, right? So what I built was this Constitution of Worlds. And in story, the humans had to leave Earth because it was devastated by the end of the Great War. So in about 2100, thereabout, they moved to this planet, and they all landed on this planet with about the remaining 100,000 humans that were all that was left of Earth. And so, there you go, Luna. Then I'll have Cookie Sugar Shine, and she will be just some badass assassin, and that'll be the way it goes. So, anyway, so in world, they established this constitution which gave 5 rights to every living being that they ever meet, and these 5 rights are written here, and I'll read them out because it's hard to actually read this, is what Donald was saying. So let me read them out. Right number 1, no being shall be denied the right to life by the civilization unless their life or action poses a direct threat to the livelihood of other beings in the civilization. And that's the war right, right? We can't go to war with you unless we can verify that you are a threat to us. So, and you have to validate that you're a threat before we can go to war with your culture. Right number 2, no being will be denied the right to have every chance to better themselves. Civilization must not discount or give up on a being. Beings must be free to try and fail as often as needed to be successful. This is the prison right. We can't just lock you in prison and leave you there. You have the right to make yourself better. So if you can figure out a way to better yourself in society, society has to further that and give you that thing. Right number 3, no being will be willfully crafted by another being. This is the modification, genetic modification, and android right. So you can't create AIs. And Brent's sitting there going, no! At third right. Third right is important because it addresses what it goes on a lot when you deal with like Measure of a Man from Star Trek, Next Generation, where they talk about Data and whether Data is a living being, and whether he has rights and things like that. This circumvents that whole thing by saying you can't build an AI that's smart, right? It also probably came about, if you think about it, by building more and more intelligent computers, which ultimately will become slaves, right? At some point in time, a computer gets smart enough that...
Sorry, I'm not sure.
No, not you. That was an irony. Anyway, a computer will get smart enough that it gets sentience. And when it does, should it still do the job? Should it still build automobiles every day? Do you pay it? What do you do? So this circumvents it. There's a line that they drew in the sand that says that no computer can get past this intelligence line. End of story. You simply cannot do it. And we can't modify humans to a certain point. Okay, number 4. No being may be acted upon unless they are fully aware of the consequences of the action. Not their action, the action. So rule number 4 says, pay it with power. Patsy switches over there. Yes, so pay it with power. Except that what do you do if it doesn't work? Take away its power? That's like paying people with food, right? What do you do if they don't want to work? They should have the right to decide to do something else. Be part of the culture in some other way. Yeah, you can't have, like, for example, an artist computer. You know, the computer. Sorry, not you. Never mind.
I'm really sorry.
She's really sorry. Oh God. Anyway, so that, you know, all of that stuff gets bypassed by this, by Rule 3. So Rule 4 says no being. Yes, everybody has sort of a basic income. They have a right to, and that depends on the culture. Like the Confederacy has a different interpretation of that than the Unity. That's one of the things I really wanted to not get into details with in the Constitution. Like, do you have a right to shelter? Do you have a right to food? Do you have a right to that kind of stuff? I didn't want that in the Constitution. I wanted it to be implied by the rules of the Constitution, but not explicitly spoken. Because I could see sides arguing in the Congress, you know, on touchdown. Touchdown's the first world that we landed on. Not the world that the story is based off of. I could see them, though, arguing over, well, what do you do if, you know, Bob over there, he decides to just sit around and watch Oprah all the time? What do you do? And, you know, one side saying, well, he has a right to sit around and watch Oprah. And then the other side saying, well, you know, you can't just have everybody in our society sitting around watching Oprah. You know, so I could see that being, could you come in here and sneeze on my show, please?
Sure.
Thank you. I could see that being an issue. So, rule number 4 says no being may be acted upon unless they're fully aware of the consequences of the action. So I can arrest you, but I have to tell you that you're going to be imprisoned and you will have a trial and yada, 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 yada. And you have to understand that before I haul you away in the car. This prevents people from arresting people without their knowledge. This wasn't necessarily designed to be a rule put down because to protect you from the government per se, not like our Posse Comitatus Act, which we have in America, which does protect you from our military. Oprah. Somewhat like Fireflies and Serenity's rules, yes. But this rule, what it prevents you from doing is the government can't arrest you without you saying, I understand that I'm about to be arrested. And this is why. They can still arrest you, but you have to acknowledge that you are aware of what they're doing. They can't just steal you in the middle of the night. So, what this does for me in a story, though, is this is one half of the Prime Directive. You can't just go to some civilization you've never met before, and you can't just go down there and give them guns to fight in their fight, right? Because that violates, they don't know the consequences of having guns. This is the people who have bows and arrows, right? You can't just go down there and give them guns so that they can fight their war with guns, because now they don't understand fully the consequences of those actions. So until they do, there is not a right to bear arms. And the major reason that that's there, and I actually think that would be a good delineating fight between Unity and Confederacy. One of them maybe has a right to bear arms. One of them maybe doesn't. That'll allow us to be able to discuss that conflict. The reason is because your constitutional rights theoretically should preclude the need to have arms. You shouldn't need to be defending yourself from the government. The government can't, by constitution, destroy you, in theory. So I think when you talk about the Founding Fathers at touchdown, what are they worried most about? They're coming in from a war where everybody locked arms and we all fought together gallantly to fight a unified enemy. One unified enemy. So they're coming from the point of view of the end of World War II, where all of us were as a team and we all worked together. And the humans were effectively, France in this one, right? They got wiped out, they got beaten down, but everybody around them all teamed up and we all got into this fight together. So they're not, unlike America, which was fighting against a tyrannical government, Britain, when their constitution was made, this constitution is coming from a different point of view, which is now we're part of a galactic culture. And how do we handle now being a sentient culture? So there's no right to bear arms. That doesn't mean that there isn't a law that gives you the ability to bear arms or not ability to bear arms in one of these two cultures. It's not a right in the Constitution. So right, and the fifth right then is no being may be denied the right to live their lives as they intend it, unless it poses a direct threat to the livelihood of themselves or the other beings in civilization. You have every right to go sit in your house and watch Oprah. That's the way it goes. And I have no right to stop you from watching Oprah. So that's pretty much what that is. 4 and 5 work together to be my prime directive. I can't go to this planet and change their culture unless it's clear that their culture is destroying themselves. I can't do anything. So Oh, it's a whole bunch of teddy bears that are fighting a little war with bows and arrows and spears. I can't do anything with that. That's their right. They have a right to live their own life, and so far their war has not actually caused genocide. So if you're going down to Endor and giving them all guns, are you arming bears? Just wondering. So that's the thing, and that's what these are the 5 undeniable rights that every being has. Now, as Brent has observed, these are intelligent beings. That's part of the quantification. Both Brent and Raph noted that I had put some intentional holes in here so that it's hard to deny that. So not Star Trek Kelvin #2 where Kirk saved that planet. Yes. Right. Well, and there is another solid hole, right? Something to explore. I can let you sit in your house and rot away, but the question is, if you're watching propaganda and it's making you decide that you need to overthrow the unity, now is it a violation of the 5th right? Right? If you sit in your household and just become, something in the order of like 250 kilos or 300 kilos or something like that, and you can't move anymore, does the government have the right then to get in there and say, okay, that's it, no more Twinkies? I mean, it's like there's like another wonderful gray area. That's the best part about this Constitution is now that I wrote it, I have all these wonderful gray areas that I can write little stories into, and I can write sub-stories and subplots. This is a very fertile world that I put in there. It sounds totally plausible. These five undeniable rights sound totally plausible. Like somebody would come up and say, these are our undeniable rights. And I'm sure that there was a Donald in the Congress that sat there and said, but wait, shouldn't they have a right to arbitration? Well, no right to arbitration, because you have to ask the questions of how arbitration works. In this alien race, you have to ask your wife for permission before you have arbitration, or whatever. I'm just making it up. I don't know. But I mean, my thought is that it gets into the weeds as to what arbitration is. I guess that should be a question, though. Do you have a right to an unbiased third party's arbitration? That could be something I could see being a right. So the 6th right would be that you have a right to a third party unbiased arbitration. And then, how would you ask that? Well, I mean, because, I totally... This reminds me... Everything reminds me of a Star Trek episode. I know, you're shocked. You're shocked, I tell you. Shocked. But now I'm thinking about the Sheliak episode, the episode where they had to move a colony because the Sheliak wanted to destroy the world and make it livable for the Sheliak, and they had a treaty which one of the rules of the treaty was that they had any dispute had to be dealt with by a third party arbitration, and that's how Picard dealt with this story, dealt with the plot. was that he named the Grisalians. Six sounds better just so you avoid the World War II Germany overtones. So you're saying you don't want the Fifth Reich, the Third Reich? And my feeling on this one is by 2100, the Nazis were the least of our problems at that point. You know what I mean? There had been a galactic war. It had been pretty brutal. Things had been nasty. But let's talk about the Sixth Reich. Right? No being, because they all start, well, may be denied arbitration by a disinterested third party. There we go. So the Sixth right now, and tell me if this sounds, no being may be denied arbitration by a disinterested third party. Maybe denied arbitration. I almost want to, I don't know. It doesn't fit. It's like Third Reich. Third Reich doesn't fit. And I'm willing to allow one of them to be weird. Like, Third Reich doesn't fit, but I kind of like that it doesn't fit, because in a way, that's the one that says, no being can willfully craft another being. I like it being weird, because it sounds like a religious group probably put it in there initially. You can't be a recognized third party. Denied. That's good. That's good. No being may be denied arbitration by a recognized, disinterested third party. That's good. Disinterested third party. I also feel like, right, true neutral third party. That makes sense. That's this way it's a true neutral third party. I want to have a third party. I intend to have the rabbits in my front yard be the third party that I have chosen. Right. I can see that. But it must be also disinterested. Well, the rabbits don't care about what I do, but since we're arbitrating over whether you can bulldoze my house or not, I think the rabbits are going to vote with me. Well, that's an interested third party now, right? Recognized, disinterested third party. I also like when we use words like recognized, that gives me plot holes to work with, right? This gives me stuff, well, we don't recognize Donald as a disinterested third party. Why? Well, because I know he's going to vote for you. Come on. Right? So, Donald is a Democrat, and we all know that you're a Democrat, and Donald's a Democrat, and so we don't recognize him. Well, yeah, but he's not involved in my campaign. Doesn't matter. We still don't recognize him, so you're going to have to find somebody else. Well, there's only Democrats or Republicans to pick from, and if it's a Republican, you win. Well, I'll recognize a Republican. I can totally see this being a political argument you can totally see how that would become squabbling in Congress, and all of a sudden there's and they're all going to start squabbling because they can't. This is a good way to politically lock somebody so that they can't pass a law for you, which all of us Americans are sadly so familiar with our lawmakers finding cute tricks to lock policy so that it won't follow through. And I have absolutely every faith that in 2500, 2600, in 2600. Yeah, it's got that odd double negative feeling to it. No being may be denied. So I was noticing that all of these start with no being will be denied. Okay, I've got shall in the first one and will in the second one. Okay, what do we think, guys? No being shall be denied or no being will be denied? Which one sounds... Maybe shall is better. I think shall's probably better. All five of the other ones start with no being shall. Or no being will. I think shall. I'm going to go for shall. And now you know why it took 4 days for them to write the Constitution of the United States. Because people... And Brent's thinking will be. Yes, I completely agree, Donald. Donald says recognized is so they aren't bribed or coerced. I completely agree. When you think about these poor founding fathers who are putting together this Constitution on some horrible, nasty world, and they're trying to struggle to kind of put it together and think about all possible potential plot holes here. I like the fact that they didn't cover everything. That makes it real. I mean, that makes it very realistic. It feels true that there are bits and pieces that just didn't work, So Brent's arguing for will be. So no being will be willfully crafted. No being will be acted upon. No being will be denied. The issue, as it sounds like they're being denied the arbitration by the third party, as opposed to being allowed arbitration. No being will be denied arbitration by a recognized, disinterested third party. Sounds like they are being denied arbitration, as opposed to being allowed arbitration. Not sure. Because I think that what it's saying is constitutionally, I can't deny that to you. So I can't, by act of constitutional right, I can't say, well, Luna, I know you're having a fight with Bob over there, but I can't deny arbitration for you. So we'll have to go find you an arbiter who's recognized by both of you and is disinterested, doesn't know either one of you, and is willing to do this. So I also think it would set the culture where you have people who are actively, I've got to arbitrate this fight between you two because I got to go to work, but first I'll tell my boss that I've got to arbitrate your, So I mean, as in like jury duty seems like, oh, see you later, Luna. So I want to address what Brent was talking about, which is will be versus shall be. I noticed that our Constitution in the United States uses a lot of shall. In fact, all of our laws tend to use shall be. I feel like will be indicates that that has a little bit more of a connotation of you don't do it or else. As opposed to shall be, which has sort of the connotation of we as a people together agree that this is a thing we're going to do. Will be implies that the government's going to lay down the rod if you don't do this. It's going to hit you with that. It's going to beat you. It's going to lock you in prison. And, it feels a little bit more punishing. Does that sound? Am I making any sense here? Does it sound like I'm not making any sense? What do you think, guys? Do I sound crazy? I mean, my feeling is I'm going for shall be, unless you guys have kind of something else you want to work with on that. I don't know. What is the legal definition? So that's what I think is going to be so much fun, is thinking about where did these cultures go with this? These are the 6 basic rules that all of us live by. Yeah, crazy is good in sci-fi. Crazy is always good in sci-fi. So, but what is the legal definition? That's a good question. It does make you wonder. So, okay. No being may be denied arbitration by a recognized disinterested third party. And that's the other thing. I'm not going to deny you that arbitration. I'm also not going to give it to you, but I'm not going to deny you. Right? I can see that one being willfully and happily abused as well. Like, oh yeah, I didn't deny them arbitration. They could have had anybody. So I feel like that would be good. Hey, we've received 100 messages today with Restream Chat. I think I'm going to go with shall. It sounds more law-like, legalese. No being shall be denied the right to life by the civilization unless their life or action poses a direct threat to the livelihood of the other beings in the civilization. No being shall be denied the right to have every chance to better themselves. Scenarios will arise, such expectations from the norm or rules that cause subclasses or amendments to be added. I totally agree. These 6 rules were what the first civilization created. What the Unity does is have another set of rules that they'll add on to. But just like laws here in our culture, we take very seriously if you try to shut down, if the government comes in to shut down a media organization, because that's a violation of the First Amendment to the Constitution. But if you park in a no parking zone, you don't find people, and then get a ticket for it. You don't find people in that same kind of, okay, Brent, you keep doing that. That's cool. We'll keep talking at you. At some point in time, you'll have to say, no, don't get rid of synths. I like synths. Actually, I don't intend to get rid of synths at all. I just intend to make it a moral ambiguity. There's absolutely going to be synths in the universe. They're just morally ambiguous, and it's difficult to deal with them, and you're not going to have them roaming around the streets, doing stuff. The only things that can roam around the streets that are robotic are going to have to be dumb robots, and they're not going to be interactable and things like that. So don't worry, Brent. Your character could still exist, might still exist, most definitely could exist. So, but yes, I feel like there's like levels of how we deal with things, right? Here in Colorado, of course, now marijuana is legal. That has been a big fight in our culture for a long time. And like the federal government still sees it as a Schedule 1 drug. It is a major offense to sell marijuana and stuff like that. It is horrible. But we don't fight over that the way that we fight over, say, the First Amendment, or the way that we fight over the Fourth Amendment, or even the Second Amendment. Those things are like, you can't break those. You can't violate those. Those are constitutional rights. Now, it's not a constitutional right to not. In fact, we did do that. The 14th Amendment, well, not the 14th, it was the 18th Amendment. 18th Amendment. The 18th Amendment, where we decided that alcohol was, by amendment to the Constitution, illegal. And that went over well. We had to make the 19th Amendment to make the 18th Amendment null. Sort of thing. So, right, the right to drink beer after 10 p.m. in a bar, says Donald, and he's right. But I feel like that's why I'm trying to kind of look at how we want to put these 6 core amendments in. These are the ones that, the military says that we can't have more than 22 people on shore leave at any given point in time. Don't worry about it, Donald. Just go on shore leave. I just won't report it. You know what I mean? Okay, that's a law, and characters will probably break that law. You know what I mean? That's just a thing. It's like parking in a no parking zone. But when we are landed on a planet and we're trying to figure out whether we should talk to the Ewoks or not, you don't sit there and go, well, we can only send 22 people by law. That's not going to be a big fight. Nobody's going to care about that. They're more interested now in the first core appendix of our rights. So we're looking more at these 6 laws and trying to figure out how to deal with those. So, yeah. So I feel like these 6 rules are good. 6th right now makes sense. I mean, we have to arbitrate this. I can't deny you arbitration. But I like the idea that I can't deny you arbitration. I don't have to get you arbitration. That's up to you. If you want to arbitrate this, you can. I can't deny that. You get shore leave, but you're not allowed to drink. Yeah, Brent, that's good. That's awesome. I appreciate you guys coming in here and chatting with me on this one. This is I'm very excited about this. This patched a bunch of holes that I was having a hard time patching, which allows me to still tell the story that I was after and get us into the moral quandary that I really wanted to explore, without me having to rely on it's not the prime directive, it's the first directive. Right? Because, I mean, that's... You want more than just... I've noticed that that's what Orville has done, and I'm not knocking Orville at all. I love Orville. By the way, I'm a major Orville fan. But that's what Orville did, was instead of the prime directive, it's called the first directive, or something like that. And they can't violate that. They're not... And it seemed like not a cop-out, but... Yes, gunboat diplomacy is always run into in space. Gunboat diplomacy is one of my big pet peeves in the universe. I hate gunboat diplomacy, but it is absolutely a reality. It's actually one of the reasons why I tend toward a particular political party here in America is because the other party tends to go for gunboat diplomacy a lot, and I hate that. But that's my personal belief, and I feel that I might be just a little too woohoo about it, and so I get that, and that's cool. But I do let that influence my political leanings. But that's what I let him influence my political leanings. I try not to let the news tell me who to vote for, because that's not as good an idea. But yeah, gunboat diplomacy, and who uses gunboat diplomacy? I mean, obviously, once you start shooting, you are now in violation of the constitutional rights of every being in the galaxy, as defined by the folks on Touchdown. So these things are things to think about. That's what I'm working on. So I'm working on that thought process. And by the way, I'm evolving my show a little bit here to keep working into this world, but we're going to talk for 2 hours while I wait for Photoshop to crash, which it hasn't done yet. So I kind of was hoping that I would record when Photoshop decided to jump ship on me. But we're still there, and it's still rolling. I don't know what causes Photoshop to crash. Well, yes, and Star Trek is notorious for that. That's a known quantity of the writers of Star Trek. Is the Klingons were Russians for a while, and then they moved on to whoever was the enemy du jour at that time. Cardassians, Romulans, all of those guys are definitely simulacrums for our current situation. I mean, there's a number of original series episodes that are blatant. Let This Be Your Last Battlefield is absolutely a blatant smack you in the face commentary about racism. So much so that it hasn't aged as well, right? A Short Victorious War is all about Vietnam. And since that was on their minds at the time, that was definitely a thing that they were discussing. So, it's the episodes of Star Trek, even Turnabout Intruder. Turnabout Intruder was in your face, smack you in the face about women not being able to be starship captains. And so much so, it was about equal rights. It's just that it was, they've always been that way. It's been very strongly that way. It's one of the reasons why I get so aggravated when people start whining about Discovery and Picard and all the newer ones being PC. I'm like, Star Trek's always been PC. And then they're like, well, they've never been so blatant. So I'm like, they've been pretty blatant too. Code of Honor in TNG is so about racism that it ends up, and it's so blatantly about racism that it ends up being racist. It's just by accident. This is the nature of Star Trek. And so much so that those of us that are influenced by Star Trek do the same things. We bring that into our stories too. So I'm trying to be a little bit more subtle, but I want the ability to be able to make movements like that in the story. I like to talk about moral quandaries, so that when you're reading my story, you end up at the end of the story going, I never thought of that. Moral quandaries. So there's that. There's always like the moral quandaries that we run into every day. I think about those too. I got a lot of moral quandaries that make me kind of wonder and ponder. 600 years from now, will we still have the same hang-ups about nudity? Will we have still have the same hang-ups about weight, body image, things like that? And how do you express that? You know, how do you express all of this without inadvertently making a mistake? And, you know, have all my characters wandering around naked for a while, and everybody's going to say, well, you guys writing porn. I'm not. But in and of itself, that's a statement, right? It's commentary about what's going on. You know, Donald had brought this up too about characters that had weight, that were overweight, or things like that. And I felt like in the future, we're not going to do the two things that cause us to be overweight, in my opinion. One, food here is all tilted towards sugars and things like that. So you're eating an insane number of calories every day just to keep alive, because sugar is empty, and so it doesn't actually fuel you. So you eat more sugar to get enough fuel to fuel your body, but that ends up being 3,000 calories. So you end up overeating. On two, I don't think that our people will stress eat in the future. So I think there will be overweight people, but I think that will be a thyroid problem or an issue that they've got to deal with. So people won't have the shaming that we've got now. Because if you're overweight, it's like people being bald. It's not like something you can do. You know, there's nothing you can do about it. But again, it's something to explore, right? There needs to be an exploration to it. What's going on there? Why? Why is that a situation? What's going on there? And could be turned, because that's a more healthy way of viewing it. You know, instead of just shaming people for being fat, which we all know is not a good thing. There's stuff to think about, cultural stuff to think about here. I do think, though, in the comic, I'm not going to shy away from some of these topics for fear that people won't read the book or whatever. It'll be one of those things. If you can't handle it, don't read the book. You know, if discussing weight is a problem, don't read the book. If discussing nudity is a problem, don't read the book. You know, that kind of stuff. So I think that's the way it goes. So that's where I stand on all of these things. A lot of this, I think, is going to be an issue with me trying to sell these books. I don't want naked people in here. What fat people in here? Okay, whatever. I'm not trying to make a statement that either one of those things is bad. I'm not sure. Anyway. Okay. Well, we talked today about the Constitution of Worlds, and I really appreciated all of your feedback. Any last thoughts on this before we kind of wrap this up and head to lunch? Because I'm kind of hungry. I'm heading for lunch here. I'm thinking, food sounds good to me. But I want to make sure we've got like the last few things going on here. You guys helped me add a constitutional amendment. Appreciate that. So, and we wrote it in a way that just added just enough that people could abuse it. Because there will be people who will abuse this stuff. So we got to figure that out. But I also feel like that there's enough diversity in this that you could have lawyers arguing over two different constitutional amendments that argue with each other. You know, well, you had a right to arbitration. How about a ruling body? That's a good question. Do we need a constitutional right to a ruling body? That's an interesting question, because you're going to lock people in as soon as you do. You know, do you have a constitutional right to a ruling body? I would argue that's not constitutional. Like, I'm building a constitution here. Probably not. You have a right to have somebody that rules over you, because I think that Yeah, like the rules for term limits. That's not a bad thing to think about either. You're right. One of the things that I think we talk about a lot is term limits. But is that constitutional? And personally, I look at the United States Constitution as prototyping, right? There are some parts of the Constitution that didn't need to be in there, and some parts that did need to be in there but really can be excised. Um, well, I feel like that's the right to representation is covered by sixth right. No being shall be denied arbitration by a recognized, disinterested third party. So I also think that there could be jokes there. I've got jury duty, and if anybody was disinterested, it's me. You know what I mean? I feel like there's a good, you can make some, side snark on that. I'm definitely a disinterested third party. I'd rather be anywhere but here. You know, I totally see, you know, oh, now you're bleeding. Brian is here saying he's bleeding. Poor Brian. Hey, Brian, welcome to the show. For the last few minutes that we got going on here before we go to lunch. I mean, we're only about 7 minutes in. So, tell you real quickly the short and simple. Last night I was trying to write on my comics and realized that I was getting stuck by the Prime Directive because all my comics are holdovers from Tamerlane. And Tamerlane was a Star Trek comic. So I was getting stuck with the Prime Directive. So I came up with the Constitution of Worlds, which is a set of 6 laws that were put down by the initial civilization that's the prototype of all the civilizations that came after it, because it's been 500 years since then. And these 6 laws, which originally they were 5, but the guys here in the discussion have added a 6th one. And now we're putting it to the test by asking certain questions like, do they have a right to a ruling body? Do they have a right for term limits? Things like that. I feel like term limits, ruling body, that would preclude people. You would have to, by constitution, I think that would impose on people, right? So let me go on ahead and address that, and I'll say this like this. Okay, you come upon settlement number 1, 2, 3, 4. There's only a family there, right? But by constitutional right, you have a right to a governing body. So now you have to pay taxes, and we, by constitutional right, have to force you and this little family to tithe part of your income to us, because it's your constitutional right to have a ruling body over you. I feel like that's what would be abused. The abuse of that one would definitely get ugly. I feel like all the other abuses that we've got in here on these other ones aren't by government abuse. They're by individual abuse, like third right would have the abuse would be that Joe over here would silently build an AI. And Bob over here would silently manipulate his DNA. Right? Which that then can be held, they can be held to a higher standard by arbitration, right? You take them to court effectively, and you discuss whether they should or should not have done that, and how do you punish them for that. But I feel like putting a constitutional amendment that you must have a government puts the government in the driver's seat, right? I feel like they could abuse that. The government could abuse that one, you know. And even though these 6 amendments weren't built in the way that our Constitution was built, I feel like they were built still with the, let's keep the government in check, shall we? To some degree. I feel like there's still some feeling of government check in there. I don't have the right to tell you how to live your life by constitutional amendment. So I also feel like an amendment to say that you have the right to a government is overstepping that. You want to be an anarchist, that's fine. Until you start damaging society, you can be an anarchist all you want. Live in the hills, in a little cabin that you own by yourself, that's yours, and we will leave you alone. We expect nothing of you, and we will give you nothing. You know. But the one thing you have a right to by Constitution is you have a right to live there by yourself on your own. I don't have to hook on power, though. You don't have a right to power. You don't have a right to water. If you've got power generation and water generation on your own, have a ball. Have a field day. You know. So that's my feeling on that. Right to representation, I feel like, is covered by arbitration. But a right to representation, like having a representational democracy, would mean that if we put that in there, that would mean that the Confederacy would be in violation of the Constitution because they have a direct democracy. Right to have beer. That is the seventh right there. Beer. Just say it. Don't think we don't mean that. That's the seventh. You know, I think I'm going to actually make that like the unofficial seventh right. And I'm going to have one of the characters like getting sloshed. And they're like, don't you think you shouldn't be getting sloshed? Seventh right is the right to beer. I totally could see that. I'm going to write that down before I forget it. Right to have beer. There we go. It may not be actually written in stone, but it's totally going to be the unofficial. Everybody knows this. It's sort of a thing we all say. Sort of like, in essence, exactly what we're talking about here, right? We've got, we talk about all of our rights. The right that we're talking about here is, we talk about setting in stone. These guys on Touchdown literally cut all of these rights into a stone. So it is set in stone. These rights are literally set in stone. But, right, just the catch-22 one. So, I mean, I feel like that's, so, yeah, I mean, that's interesting. Well, guys, I really appreciate this. You guys have been really awesome. I've been really grateful to have you guys around for all of this. This has been really amazing. I had a feeling this morning when I was like, after I wrote all this last night, I was like, I've got to wait for Photoshop to crash. So I don't want to actually get caught up in something that I didn't want to work in Photoshop just to have it crash in the middle of the show, because that would be so extraordinarily frustrating. So I decided I wanted to do something else. I'm going to talk to Brian on Monday about burnout and things like that. That's going to be cool. And then tomorrow, of course, we've got our artist check-in with Raph and possibly Pepper. I never know. Pepper sometimes can join us and sometimes he can't. But we'll have an artist check-in with them. So sometimes our show is not about drawing. Sometimes our show is about interactive talking. But I wanted to kind of establish that sometimes we just talk about world building, because that's fun. Okay, guys, it's lunchtime. I'm hungry, and you probably are too. I know that Brent is cooking, so yeah, he's doing his cooking stuff. I'll see you all tomorrow. We're going to have Raph on the show, and maybe Pepper. I hope Pepper and stuff. And then you're already getting burnt out at work, and this is so new too. Oh, that sucks. Yeah, we'll be talking about artist burnout too. You're eating. I can't eat because I'm talking. Okay, guys. It was great. Thank you again for being on the show. I really appreciate it. And I will see you all tomorrow at 10 a.m. I hope you're having a wonderful day. And I hope you enjoy this. I hope you guys get the chance to go out and watch Lower Decks. Because that's what I'm going to do. I mean, obviously. And then I promised Brent, because I like my computer not being hacked, I promised Brent that I wouldn't say spoilers. Anyway, I'll see you guys later. Have an excellent day. Bye-bye.